Unfolding, nothing to chase. Only this just holding. Still, you are the space where every moment arrives. You are not the story. You are not the storm. Just the open sky, wide and warm. Bridge between worlds, here and now. Between worlds, empty, clear, still alive. You are the space where every moment arrives. Inhale slow.
I'm not used to seeing this kind of shit, and I don't want my country to turn into a country where this is a normal thing.
Every thought just passing
Starting at the violence. Yeah, the attacks that have been happening to our religious institutes across the country.
I mean, this new generation of children, I'm going to say going up to probably the last 15 years, I'm trying to gauge the age, only know to go into a temple in front with metal detectors. They don't know, they've never entered a religious institution any other way. I mean, it's just kind of strange to think about it, that they just don't know what it's like to just be able to freely walk in the building. They've never done it.
You know what, Abby? I'm going to recommend another video if I will. It's the Dad Saves America YouTube channel, and the specific video says we don't know the meaning of this error for 50 years. He's interviewing Arthur Brooks, and one of the stats he brings up, which people forget. I think it was the late 60s, 70s. There were over 700 domestic terrorist incidents in the United States. I think in a year, it might be for the error. I'd have to watch it again to remember. But even if it's over, 5 years, that's still a huge amount. And guess who committed the majority of those? It was the left. So his main point is that these things go in cycles. And what we're seeing is now the pendulum swinging back from the hard left progressive stance. Sadly, I think we're not done with all of this left-wing political violence, which has outpaced right-wing political violence for the first time in a number of years. But yeah, it sucks that this is happening. And Coco, I get it. You know, you don't want to live like this. No one should have to live like this. But these periods of this kind of unrest is not unprecedented, not only in the United States, I think, but throughout the world. And it's something we got to go through. I think what's different now is, well, actually, I was going to say I think it's different because we have our era of social media. I mean, the visibility of these incidences is greater. I think that's true to some degree. On the other hand, back when before television, families sat down and listened to the radio. So you were still getting news, and it could be just as impactful. So I don't know. And that's not to say, and I've said all of this, not to say that it makes anything, but just to say that here we go again.
Yeah, I'm glad there's action being took towards this on behalf of the state. I think we should do this across the United States.
Well, we have, but you have your governor is, proactive about it, which is great.
I like her.
But the federal government did something. I forget when the grant program started. Started out, it was a couple $100 million, and the needs, across the country were pretty significant. What's the irony is that when they do the awards, states that don't have high statistics of crime and threats don't get the grants as readily as places where there's just a higher statistic on it. And it's a bit political. The different members and the senators jockey for position for their states. But I gotta believe where you are, there's not a problem. Like I would think they'd probably get a pretty big allocation there.
Yeah, I think so too. Between Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids, there's like a spike in crime. So hopefully it'll just be across all of these regions. People are against Americans either, I will say. I've noticed, at least in the past couple weeks, there's some people that I'm kind of confused that our system has let slip through the cracks, as far as they're not originally from here, right? And the guy who just shot up the university, I think it was in Pennsylvania.
Virginia.
High school student
Virginia.
Yeah. So he actually became a citizen in 2016. I was looking into this. And he also committed another terror attack previously, like a year after he became a citizen. They let him out, I believe it was 2021, and now here he is again, committing another fucking terror attack. Why? I'm not sure what's going on there, but if we have a crack down on immigration, I think these are when President Trump is saying, we want to get the worst of the worst out, well, that looks like the worst of the worst to me.
Because the question is, what did he get charged with? Did he get charged with domestic terrorism, or did he get charged with something like assault?
Pretty sure after this one, it's probably domestic terrorism because it was on a university. Let me check back into it. What his original?
Is he alive? Did they
I see. I'm not
reach
seeing.
him now? The one in,
Sure, let me grab it.
I truly can't believe that they let millions of people in without any kind of scanning, and then you have to pay 100,000 for an H1 visa a year. Like an AI expert can't get in the country, but you can get somebody off the street without even any verification whatsoever.
It's called left-wing logic, Sam. They actually let them in.
Please. Like the reason the Trump wing rose up in part was because the establishment Republicans had failed to enforce immigration law. Right? Like that had been a thing, a beat, a drum for all of my lifetime, if not longer.
I have to disagree. Trump, we clearly, and here's why. And then I'm going to call you a poo-poo face at the end of this, just for good measure. No, because Trump, you remember, Trump had the asylum seekers wait at the border, on the other side of the border, which was an effective deterrent to people coming, who wanted to come being threatened in my country and getting lost in the system. Correct. Day one, Joe Biden rescinds it, and everyone got the message. Republicans are harder on immigrants.
He tried to use it and got told by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Say that. Say what? Who? I didn't hear.
The thing you're referring to is something called Title 42. Title 42 was in place under the Trump administration. Biden tried to keep it in place under his administration. In the court,
why couldn't they keep it going when Trump had it going?
An emergency law. That's what the court judge. Would you like me to move it again?
So you're saying Biden? It wasn't Biden's fault. It was the court's fault.
Yes, there was a judgment made by the court.
And which court was this?
Which we were no longer under.
Yeah, I think you're trying to pin it on one court ruling.
Which it is one court ruling, Alan.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
Yeah, it is. That's the court ruling.
So you don't think the Biden administration willfully wanted these people to come in?
You're missing my...
And why is it that when Trump retook office...
I was making...
Because you're using this obscure thing as if it matters.
No,
when it doesn't. Day one, got that, and he's sworn into office, and he shuts it down. I'm sorry, the Democrats are not that helpless.
I didn't say they were helpless.
Then what is your point?
Which you're not quoting me correctly, that it came from a U.S. appellate court. If you don't...
It changed the Biden administration.
No.
And any other narrative to do it that way is a code. I am sorry. You are arguing a court issue when it was a political decision, and you know it. We saw 4 years. In 4 years, Biden couldn't get his shit together to stop those immigrants from coming in. And you're going to pin it on one appellate court? Yes, Trump has been sued 60 times at least, and he's still getting this shit done.
You're missing the point. I'm not.
No, you've missed the point.
All of that. I was making a point.
Marshall.
In fact, a federal court.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm getting heated, and I really shouldn't be. Continue.
kill him. So, I mean, don't have to worry about that anymore. But he was convicted of terrorism for that first charge. And they let him out of federal prison for completing a drug treatment program, which makes no fucking sense to me, right? Because you're a fucking terrorist. And then
there's a charging problem. That's like they didn't charge him properly. Not like the immigration system let him in and he committed this crime, and now because he committed this crime, we can revoke his immigration status. He became a citizen. Like Timothy McVeigh was charged and then put in the U.S. They have definite times you can be in jail for. Like Texas, if we say life, it's life. Other states, right? So I think that's part of it.
Huge problem for me. Why are we? What the fuck? You know what I mean?
If you do it once, you can do it again.
I would be curious of the legal rationale for why they let him out if that's public record, which would do, I think, would be one of the key things you would find to do that. And Alan, you wanted to answer your question? Title 42, this would be New York, November 18th of 2022. Title 42 ruled illegal by federal court. This week, the U.S. Federal District Court struck down the U.S. government's Title 42 exclusion policy, ruling it unlawful without public health justification. Title 42 has been used since March 2020 to rapidly expel asylum seekers and southern border, grave danger,
LGBTQ refugees,
editorializing to be important. What we're taking,
including LGBTQ refugees,
which is the ability to do that, which means the Biden administration maintained it for at least 2 years. Like that's an important point.
Let me say it. I looked it up. Yes, President Biden immediately acted to suspend the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy upon officially known as the Migrant Protection Protocols upon taking office in January 2021. His administration formally halted new enrollments immediately and began phasing out the program, though the policy was legally challenged, briefly reinstated by courts, and formally terminated later. On January 2021, DHS suspended new enrollments in the program. Biden began allowing those with active cases to enter the U.S. down. Legal challenges, termination faced lawsuits to temporary. The termination faced lawsuits by the I'm guessing by conservatives, but I don't know, who wanted it to remain in place, and then the Supreme Court eventually allowed it to be ended in June of 22. So basically, my guess is that Supreme Court said this is part of the executive branch. Biden gets to do that, just as they ruled that Trump also gets to set what you're saying is correct, Marshall, but it was separate from what I'm saying, the point I'm making, that Trump, as the executive, said this is the policy, remain in Mexico. Biden says, nope, you can come here and seek asylum here. And the main point is that sends a very different message to people around the world, which is under Trump, it's stay away, we're going to make it hard. And under Biden, it's come on down, we're going to make it easier for you to come in. And I think that's an important distinction.
I would agree. But I will also say this is like per use for our conversations. we both have been
You think?
You
How can you say that?
per year.
No, I know, which is why, like, when I started talking, I did not want to do that. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, don't even worry about it, man.
Yeah.
Alan, you mentioned something about the political violence. They're committed by the liberals more than the conservatives. So Joe, I don't think he's in this room now. Joe said that you are incorrect. I asked him in the chat to provide some link or information to support his view, which is opposite to yours. So he provided actually four sources. So here's again, I'm reading this. This is from the fact checking facts by the forgot the name of the organization. It is in the chat. Anyway, the conclusion of the fact checking organization is this. This is just a paragraph. Indeed, the left-wing violence has risen in the last 10 years, but practically since President Donald Trump's rise to the political leadership in 2016, although it has risen from very low levels and remains much lower than historical levels of violence carried out by the right-wing and jihadist attackers. Well, I wasn't expecting to see jihadists here. The report stated that more contentious politics in the United States and the expansion of the Make America Great Again movement appears to have re-energized violent left-wing extremists. So you're correct in the sense that the last 10 years, the left-wing violence has risen, but overall, looking at the majority of violence by the right-wing violence. So anyway, it's in the chat. I'll just put it again. I'll find it and put it in again. It's from a very credible source, Alan. So I just wanted to kind of fact check myself on this, because you made a categorical statement here, Alan, which it seems to me may not be entirely correct.
Well, I put a link in the chat that showed where that I was referencing, and I would also argue that first of all, the stats that were included also included jihadist violence, did it not? And was that solely in the United States or worldwide? Yeah, because first of all, I would think that might skew the numbers higher, which it's a nice, subtle little dig, like, oh, right-wingers are just like jihadists, so we're going to group them together. Anyways, that little observation aside, the point the attacks on, for example, Tesla dealerships, on Tesla owners directly, things like that. Those points aside, I'm trying to look it up now, but it's interesting that they don't. I looked up. I did a Google search, and it said, "Well, it's hard." I said, how many violent incidences were there committed by the left in the 1960s? And it says, well, it's hard to put a. Let me read it exactly. It's hard to put a number on it because much of the violence was directed at property. such as bombings of corporate or government buildings through violent confrontations and targeted actions. 1960s marked the emergence of extremist anti-imperialists and anarchist groups that operated outside mainstream, etc., etc. Those were all left-wing groups. And I know this because that's what they were known for. So, yeah, it's a past. I know what you're saying, Ali, but it's a past that the left divorces itself from. Because, at a certain point in the last 20 years, they've decided that they're the party of morality and benevolence. And so they don't talk about, any of that. But,
Alan, I just read the statistic you put here in the chat. This is interesting. And I can't help but notice there's a huge number on the right as well.
Guys,
I don't know, that kind of seems like a bias.
Let me just wrap this with
So
Alan, the source is called the factcheck.org, and what the title here is what we know about political violence in America. About in the U.S. is a factcheck.org, and they look at different fact-checking stuff. This one on the political violence in the U.S., and basically one of the conclusions was the one to you, and which is in comparison over decades, the violence by the right wing is much, much higher than the left wing. With the exception of the last 10 years, the left wing actually, violence has gone up. But again, when you compare the totality of the thing, the violence by right wing is by far exceeds the left wing. Anyway,
did I claim that it was less? No. What I'm saying is that there is a change. And
that is correct. But also, go ahead.
No. Well, that's the thing. I don't think I ever said that that it's greater, but we do see a change, and I think that change is going to continue.
But the change is I'll just say one more sentence and also, hold on one second, Shindy, from their experience, the left wing violence actually will go down. So whether this is true, who knows? Anyway, Sam, please go ahead.
Don't really understand when you say left wing, right wing. It's not the same. Like the left wing 20 years ago was very different than what it is now. For example, Bill Maher was a major leftist in 2000, 2010. But right now, the left is calling him right wing for some reason. So, the way you think about this can't be right wing all your entire life. You have to be you have to go with how your party is defined. For example, I can be right wing in 2020s, but I can't be right wing in 2010s. I can't be right wing in 2040s, for example, because at that stage you need something else.
Yeah, maybe, but the thing is, at any given moment, for example, if I would ask you, what is the Republican, platform? What are the values that a Republican or a right wing holds, and what are the value system that, let's say, left wing or liberal? We can, probably enumerate what these core value systems are in all fields: economic, taxation, immigration, abortion, gender issues, sex issues. So there are, some of these values actually they remain astonishingly consistent over the decades. But I do get your point. Things change according to the current events, and Bill Maher particularly comes across, I don't want to say right wing, but certainly it is not projecting the image that his political image appears to be different now.
There's three aspects to respond to. One, the study in regards to political violence is debunked. I guarantee that the people who cite that study have not actually looked at the individual examples that they point to, because they claim to have looked at, like over 4 or 5 look piece by piece. They consider stickers on a phone pole, according to the right, as violence. They consider graffiti on the right violence, flags violence. Ironically, if you actually go case by case, they have to broaden the definition so wide to even make it within the same realm of quantity. They have to go to inanimate objects, they have to go to symbolism to just even compare it to actual acts where people are getting beat up or killed, or huge sums of financial loss. That's number one. Number two, used a very interesting word, value system. Interestingly enough, I would say that that's actually a right-wing framing of politics, because those that tend to be more liberal or secular, they don't look at politics in terms of values. They look at them as just views or policies. They use just very matter-of-fact language. So it just was interesting to use the word values. The value system of a, quote, conservative or right-wing philosophy does have a very high correlation, verging on causation, that people tend to be spiritual, be religious, or at least grew up or were exposed to a very spiritual, religious upbringing or culture or community or family, because that's foundational, that guides them beyond just politics, which is why, there's the social issues and things like that. But in regards to just principles, parties themselves are just vehicles. They're vehicles to deliver candidates to hopefully across the finish line by at least 1 inch faster than the opposing vehicle. And in modern politics, attention spans are much shorter, and so platforms have become a lot more simplified, even though the people who most pay attention to politics tend to be more intellectual, which is why there's such a bubble and such a disconnect, and why people are always so shocked by election results, because they don't actually get outside of their echo chamber and talk to normal people who have no clue what we're even referring to. Here's the thing. The modern Republican Party is very, very big tent right now, and we're figuring that out. There are some very steep divisions in regards to foreign policy. However, while that's being sorted out, it's almost unanimously on code in regards to immigration. It's almost unanimously on code in terms of less regulation and less taxation. Basically, government not being as seen and felt in your everyday life. And it seems to be universally on code in terms of just general safety, general law and order, general being protective, being stable, policies towards police, border, etc. And I think that I don't think you could find a Republican that would disagree on those topics. There's a little bit of a dying breed in regards to the lesser spending. I think it used to be that you could say that pretty much all Republicans were in favor of that. I think that it would probably still pull high, but I don't think it is actually in practice is an issue that as many people care about very much anymore. So I just don't even mention it. I would say in regards to trade, it's just changed. It's just fundamentally changed, and I don't see that going back.
Stephen, let me just go back to the first point you made on the violence.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important. I mean, to distinguish and define what's violence.
Correct.
Because you just have these studies and you have to break it down. And I mean, I just know we keep statistics. My community's been under siege, and it's just skyrocketed from the left.
Yeah, it's actual violence.
Oh, it's I can tell you it's threat. I could tell you what our threat to life incidents were last year. What we kind of. I would say what we statistically keep track of, but how many of the threat to lives we actually reported to federal law enforcement was probably about 450, and then the rest to local law enforcement, and we had about an 80% indictment. I'd have to check what the final conviction rate was from it, but it just surged. We were traditionally, it was coming from the right, and it's not like the right went away, but there's no comparison. And these are threats. They're threats to life. The vandalism it's significant vandalism. So you have to consider also what happened in the last few years with the protests that vandalized private property and federal property. Pretty significant. So if you want to add, tick all those up, I don't think you can complete.
But the thing about it too, and then I'll land just to toss it to Alan. By the way, it's great to see several of you in here.
Good seeing you too, Stephen.
I think that one of the also marked impacts of the fact that the Second Amendment is not as controversial as it was maybe 5-10 years ago. I do think that there was a period of time where, there were maybe a lot more preppers in the 2000s and 2010s, go bags, militias, all that kind of stuff. Not in an offensive capacity, but in a defensive capacity, because there was a genuine fear, and if the left wants to go, that's not valid. The fear certainly was that 2A was under siege, and that guns were genuinely going to be grabbed, and that was based on a lot of the international precedent that was happening of gun grabs. But since, to be candid, 2A is not the hot, spicy, controversial issue that it once was, because the left has largely armed itself. And so it would be very hypocritical of them to be as outspoken against 2A as they once were, because a lot of the left, whether it be revolutionary or LGBT, has armed itself. And so it's not the controversial topic anymore. And so I think that has contributed to the fact that even the potential for the right wing to be more violent is far less than it is the left, because now that both sides, they're never going to be equally armed, but now instead of it being 95-5, it's maybe more like 75-25. And, as that continues to move, the potential for violence is only going to go up from here, from the left, because your typical conservative armed individual is very disciplined. They maintain their weaponry. They do range day. They've been familiar with it their whole lives. a lot of the left are picking up these people for these weapons for the first time. They're not familiar with the terminology. They're not familiar with the maintenance. They didn't grow up in the same kind of culture where it was just kind of an everyday thing, and there was a lot of respect and a lot of dignity. They do see themselves as a lot more radical, and they see it as tools, just like how everything is a tool. Because to understand Marxism is to understand means to an end. And so literally everything, a school, a vote, a gun, is all a tool.
I just want to add to what you said and what you were saying, Abby. Yeah, how they classify all this stuff is important, and how they report the numbers is important. I forget which year it was, but the Biden administration came out with their crime statistics, and oops, crime went down, but they left out, I think they left out Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York or something.
Yeah, no, it's a huge reporting problem. I actually have something, I have to look at my notes I saved about that a letter issued from the FBI about the reporting problems. They redid their whole system after that happened.
Yeah, but it was like, okay, here's the crime numbers. Look, it went down, and then 2 months later, they include those cities, and the numbers were very different. And we saw, and you see a lot of that, like you mentioned it, Stephen, like what they consider to be a mass shooting. I forget, it's like 3 or 4 people becomes a mass shooting. And so that gets lumped in with the guy who walks into a school and starts shooting it up. So, once again, we see they're changing definitions to their advantage, which is, good for them. What can I say? But I was also going to say, Allie, I understand where that report is coming from. And so, again, its main thrust is about the change, but I advise isn't the right word. I encourage you to read the rest of it, because that Stephen Reed, he left, because it talks about not only the violent incidences, but it breaks down the success of those attempts, and it talks about what Stephen just talked about, that people on the right are better trained in firearms. And so when if